Welcome to Sylvan Mist Designs. I've decided today is the day that we are going to talk about swooshes. I am dividing this particular video into chapters so that you can easily move about between the information that you know, that you don't, and maybe stuff that you want to review. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me dive right in. To start with, just some basic information. Right here in front of me, I do just have 3 paints lined up. No particular color, but it's all about consistency, because consistency does matter. The thinner your paint is, the longer the tail of the swoosh is going to be. If your paint is on the thicker side, the swoosh is going to have a bulkier dot and the tail is going to be shorter. Right? So over here, just to illustrate my point, I have 3 different types and brands of paint. To start with, I've got just an apple barrel dark chocolate. Doesn't really matter, like I said, I just kind of grabbed something for you. And you can tell possibly by this already, it is the thinnest paint. It has set pretty quickly. All 3 of these, I used the same amount of paint in my palette. And this one very quickly settled and spread out because it's thinner. The other 2 are both metallic. This one is a DecoArt metallic, it's just a copper, and you can see in comparison, this one does not have the same smooth flat surface, and it still has a bulge. It certainly is thicker. And this is the thickest of the ones that I personally own. It's an off-brand, just a gold metallic. Metallics tend to be thicker regardless, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you've got a normal thicker paint. But again, just to kind of show you what I mean here. Next, we're going to talk about loading up this particular paint. Now, there are 3 essential ways that you can load up your paint. Well, I assume really 4. Let me show you a couple different ways, and it doesn't matter which way you use. Some methods get a little bit more paint on your tools than others, but this is going to be more personal preference and tool base. Okay, so dip, the standard dip. Now, one thing I'll show you real quick is I'm going to do just a quick sample. I've grabbed this tool just kind of as a showpiece here, no particular reason, all right? But when I normally would dip my tool to do a dot on a surface, I'm going to line it up just about like this, right? It's not completely covering over the tip of the ball, but you know, it's almost to the top here, all right? And then I have a dot. Okay, now you're going to want to load it up more than that no matter what. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drop my tool in all the way down and I'm going to coat it. All right, so now it's up above the ball. You can even see the drop of paint that's hanging off, and I'm going to drop that here. All right, you can immediately see the size difference. Now that's just the standard dip. Let's just say though that this amount of paint I don't believe is quite enough. So I'm going to go in for a regular dip. I'll put that there. And then I'm going to go back in again. And I'm going to double or triple dip. So this would be a double. And I'm just going to load that up again, right? Put another dot on it. Oh, I decided that's not enough. I'm going to go in for a third. So now I've got this nice plump dot. Not much of a size difference, but it's got a lot more paint on it. So that's method number 1. Dip and double dip 2. The third one is going to be scooping. This works really well if you have these type of tools and you've bent them. So I'm going to take my tool and just like a spoon eating soup, I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab as much as I can. Okay. Same technique though, I'm going to drop that down here. Okay. All right, so there's that one. Automatically it seems to catch just about as much paint, if not potentially more, based on your tool, as triple or double dipping it. Okay, the next one is going to be a stir. All right, nothing spectacular, but I'm just going to stir the paint around. Right, look at that. Ooh, loaded up, real nice and fat. We've got your standard dot, right, your 1 dip. Your deep, a little bit more paint to your tool, dip. The double or triple, scooping it up and stirring. Obviously, as you can tell, there's not a tremendous amount of difference. Let me get rid of this. Now tools. Tools and surface aren't going to be as necessarily as important as you might think. In front of me, I do just have these three basic tools, right? This particular one here is initially for clay work. All right, these tend to be quite a bit heavier, but they do have the bigger balls on the ends. Obviously, you're thinking, okay, well, these might be a great tool just for the simple fact that they have larger heads on them. They can carry more paint, thus a larger swoosh. Well, yeah, to an extent, that's absolutely true, keeping into consideration the thickness of your paint. All right. My other tool here is going to be the smallest nail stylus that I own, and the reason for that is because of this tip. This particular one does not have a bowl tip like this one does, not rounded, but more of a triangle. Not exactly pointy, not exactly sharp, but it is the smallest tip. Instead of using something like this, feel free to use any small sharp object. Use a standard sewing needle, grab a toothpick, pieces from a manicurist set, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Sky's the limit. Use whatever you can find, and I'll tell you why you want to use that. The other tool that I have here is going to be the acrylic rod. Now, the acrylic rod on its own does not make fantastic swooshes, but that is what this is for. All right. When you want to use a rod, then you want to use potentially, and I'm not going to say this is a rule because it's not, there's no rules, but you're likely, especially on the bigger ones, you're likely going to want to use a rod in combination with another tool. As far as surface is concerned and this is why I have this glass jar in front of me, because especially for practicing, I fell in love with glass. Glass is super flexible. The paint comes off really quickly, really easily, and it slides. It is so easy to dot. I loved suggesting this to any type of beginner, any smooth surface because of the flexibility that it offers, right? So you don't have to use a jar. This is just like a sauce jar that I snagged out of the kitchen and cleaned up and used for practice and stuff like this, right? It could potentially be a plastic drink cup. It could be a mug, any kind of glassware. You can also use maybe a ceramic tile if you want to grab another surface, even like a rock, and resin coat it or coat it with a good, nice seal of varnish. Perfect. I absolutely suggest that you start with something smooth. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. Again, no rules here. Because the paint slides so easily on this, it makes swooshes easy. Swooshes are my absolute nemesis. I hate them, and it took me a very, very, very long time to do anything with swooshes. But I tell you, once I started doing it on glass, I'll never go back. It flows so easily, and it's an absolute confidence booster. Do it on a smooth surface, and I guarantee it'll help. Now, if you're going to transition out, if you're going to start here and you're going to transition out to something like paper or cardstock or canvas or, a porous stone, whatever the case is, obviously the surface is not going to be the same. It's going to change the way that it feels, when you're pulling your swooshes. But you're going to have more confidence. You're going to know how to do it. You're going to know the tools that you need, and I recommend it. Okay, it's a fantastic place to start. Next is techniques. I have a few techniques that aren't new. However, the names I'm going to refer to them might be a little different than what you've heard, okay? Because initially when I was creating the written guide that I have on this, I started thinking about, okay, well, how in the world am I going to describe this to those people that are not going to be watching the video, right? And I wanted to use terminology that really related to what we were physically going to be doing on the surface. Okay, so again, it's probably not exactly what you've heard before, but I'll show you. The first technique that I have is called just dot and move. Keep in mind, in any one of these, your paint loading technique, do it however you want. The dot and move, I'll show you here. So I'm going to start just with this brown paint, just because it's easier. I'm gonna get that loaded up. What you'll want to do, load up your tool. I'm just gonna, right now, let me start with one dot, and then I'm gonna do a double. The first way you can do this, let's just assume that you're not going to double dip this. Take a normal dot, fill your paint up just a little more than you normally would, right? Give it a good dip. Lay your dot down and don't break the surface tension of the paint, okay? Leave your tool in place where it's kissing the surface, just where you laid the dot down. Don't lift it up, don't push it down, keep it right in that space and just move your hand where you want it to go. You're not pushing down on the surface, right? So you're not dragging the paint, you're not pushing the paint, you're simply holding that same position and moving your hand, right? Let it glide. The only exception to that is, okay, we're going to dot, lift, move. Dot, lift. Okay. This is going to be, I'm going to do a triple just because it's kind of a little bit of a small dot. Now, same thing, except on the third one here, we're going to kiss the surface and we're just going to move. Nothing super crazy about that, right? As you'll notice, if I do one dot and I just move the tool, it's going to be a little skinny. It shouldn't be long, but it's going to be a little skinny. Let's go in just for even a second here. See, and already with just the two, same exact length, but do you see the bulk changed immediately? Right, you still get that nice pointy tip, but it is going to make this bulkier here at the top, right underneath the head of the dot. Maybe you like these, but maybe your technique is a little bit different as far as dotting it, right? And you have now, let's do this one more time. Let's do maybe a third, okay? Let's do a third. Let's drag this down a little. Because I did this one as a third instead of a second, you see it's chunkier. And let's play around a little bit here with some of the metallics. All right, same thing. I'm just going to kind of load this up for a while. Okay, let's do 1, 2. Let's even do a third here. Right. And then I'm going to just put that down. Right away, I think you're going to see what I mean. There's no sharp tip. It's bulkier, chunky, and then this is the gold. Okay, this one is slightly thicker than the copper. I'll do the same. Do 3. I'm going to drop that down. That kind of illustrates 2 points there as far as the consistency of the paint and how that matters, what that looks like. The single dot and drag, a double and a triple in the very thin paint. The medium thickness and the more thickened, you're not going to get this super nice sharp tip here. It's going to kind of bulk out for you and this isn't going to have that nicer shape. Let's assume that you want something that's a little more curved, or you really like this kind of edge, this very, very sharp tip down here, but you don't necessarily want this bulk here. Okay, so let me wipe this off. And wipe this off. Make sure if you're doing this with a wet cloth, just like I am here, make sure it's wiped off and dry. You're going to mess things up if you leave it wet. Let's assume either option A, maybe you want a larger dot. Acrylic rod comes in, right? Or like I was saying, you want your dots to be a little bit, maybe of a different shape. You want them a little sharper, whatever. Here's what we do with this. This is going to be the dot and drag or pull. We're going to truly drag and pull. What we're going to do here, same thing, gonna load up my tool a little more than I normally would. For this, just for exercise purpose, because you really don't need it here. But this one, I'm gonna go ahead and do a second. That, okay. And here, this comes into play. All right, so this is my little nail stylus here. Instead of using your initial tool to hold onto this and drag it down, what I'm gonna do is take the tip right in the middle, and we truly are going to pull. So you can touch the surface here lightly, pull it down. All right, depending on your paint thickness, your surface, just like glass, you don't have to touch it at all. You can kind of be right at that surface level where you're kissing it. That doesn't look like a swoosh. Right? Okay, so take this side and drag it down. This side, drag it down. All right, see what I'm doing here? I'm almost drawing it. Because that's one of the other things as far as glass is concerned. Look at this. You can literally draw your swooshes on glass, right? It makes it super easy. You can almost not screw this up. I can go back in here and do this kind of craziness, right? And I'm touching the surface of the glass. That's why I said it's confidence booster, right? It's almost impossible to mess up. But you get to play a little bit. So now you can stretch this out. Let's do a pattern this time, right? Let's do a little bit of a design. I'm gonna take this here. Do we want to do 2 of them? Do I want to get a little crazy? Try not to stick this in your face there. We can come back to this tool. I did that lopsided, sorry. Draw it down, this over. Okay, all right. Or maybe you decide that you want it a little bit curved. Okay, start from this side and then bring it over. Okay, then you can fill that in. And see, these are just single dots, right? There's not a whole lot of paint, but look what I can do. You can drag this pretty much to eternity. You can drag this out a little farther if you want. Go really crazy. Get pretty long. Whatever you want to do. Don't be afraid to try this. And you're going to say it looks probably a lot easier than it is. No, really, it's not. When it's done on paper, I was struggling. I was like, oh, how in the heck do you do that? But on glass, your tools glide. It's nothing. Here we are with these ones. All right, I just showed you if you decide that you want it a little bit longer and you still have paint, go ahead and drop it. You know, just pull it longer. No big deal. Start in the center where your paint is going to gather. You know, so you're not dragging from the edges. Start from the middle, just pull it down. Easy enough. The other side of that is if you decided that you didn't want the size or the shape that you wanted, you know, you can go back to the base here. Let me get another dot on here. Let's start out kind of small. Drop it here. Let's just say that you thought, well, I'm going to do this little pattern here, and this is what I want. Then you look at it and you go, no, I want a big tail. What you can do is right where the bottom of this circle would have been, you can take it here. Just drag it down from there. All right. So I'm going to make this. Okay, and I decide, oh, that's not exactly what I want. I'm okay with it being a little bigger here. Start kind of where the bottom of this would be. And then just move it down a little, right? Whatever you want to do, that's a funny shape, but I think you get the idea. Okay, let me go ahead and wipe this off. And dry that real quick. Okay, so the consistency really does matter, and again, I'm going to kind of illustrate just as far as consistency is concerned what the different consistencies do and what they're going to look like. So I'm going to start with the smallest here. This is the thinnest of the paint that I have. I'm going to do a double dot on here just so I have enough paint to kind of show you what I mean. Just going to stretch it out a bit. Okay. I can, because this is a double dot, it can go pretty far. I'm just going to pull this down. Let's do the exact same with this copper. This is kind of my medium thickness, just for consistency's sake. Double on here as well. And I'm going to drag this. Okay. As you can already tell, I drag it straight from the middle, straight down, same as I did here. And even this little tail from the drag, it stops here, right? It doesn't even let me get to the bottom. I have to come back up and pull more, right? And you can already see possibly that you can see the lines that I'm pulling it down. You can see there's kind of like clumped. I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to try to do the same length. Even though that's the same exact technique, thicker paint though, you can see, and I'll move this around just a little bit, you can see the lines. You know, you can see where the head of the dot is, where initially that it was lifted and then pulled, and you also have a dot here. And then I'm going to go with my thickest one. And again, just for sake of consistency, let's do 2. You can already see here, this one has the large lump, right? It's got a nice raised center. Same thing, I'm going to pull this down, Very difficult to do so because it stops. You have to constantly go back in. See, it's even leaving me a gap as to where the other one did not. All right, let me draw this down. There we go. Same thing, takes a lot more work. It is not flat, right? I mean, this one still looks super flat and smooth. These two have lines and ripples if you're going to use this technique. Okay, so what if you don't want to use that technique? What if you just want to use this? I'm going to do the double dip just to make sure we've got enough paint on here. All right, and then I'm just going to do a drag. Nobody's going to do one that long, but just to show you, that's 2 dots of paint. That's going in on a double here. And I just drug it as far as it would go. Let's do the same with the medium. Okay. Let's make sure I've got enough. I even did a third one on this one, okay, because it's much thicker. Drag down. Let's do this one. And 3. Can you see the difference? In this one, because the paint, isn't like super runny versus super thick, it's a little bit more subtle. So you can see here, again, with the thinnest paint, it still tends to be pretty thin all the way to the bottom. And look at how far this went. This got all the way down here. The second medium, it starts to become a little more chunky right here. Right underneath the ball. It stays fat and then it narrows out only at the very end and it stopped here. So we've already got this much of a difference. Again, very, very chunky. Okay, it holds that same shape all the way down. The point doesn't start till here and it ends here, right? So just a little bit shorter still than this medium thickness paint. Okay, now this isn't, none of these are ugly in any way. This still makes a beautiful swoosh, but I think you see the point that I'm making here. Much longer, took 2 dips. These both took 3, and they still were not reaching the length of this one. And this one probably could have been a little bit better. I kind of goofed that a little. But I hope you see what I mean as far as consistency is concerned. All right, especially if you're going to be using tool method and drawing it out, because you might get lines. All right. As a side note too, you don't have to do it with these tools, all right? Check out the other section in regards to tools. You can definitely use things like brushes, fine detail brushes, or flat diamond tipped brushes, or silicone brushes, especially with the pointed tips. And you may not get this, right? Especially with a thicker paint. So you might take a look at working with those tools versus something like this, where you're actually, dragging and making lines, right? And that may make a more beautiful, sleeker, less indented design. But again, I think kind of as a general rule of thumb, especially when you're practicing, you may just want to start on a thinner paint. If you already have a thicker paint, grab a medium and thin that down just a smidge, all right? You don't need to go too far. But thin that down just a tiny bit, and I think it's going to give you a lot more flexibility as far as that's concerned. As far as any other tips or tricks or tools that I can think about, just like I'm doing here, like I said already, I'm never going to stop raving about practicing on a smooth surface like this. But one of the other things that you have to keep in mind, in addition, is keeping your tools clean. Because especially as you go along and you're dotting, you can start to gather a film or a ridge, especially on these ball tip nail styluses. If you keep dipping at a certain level into your paint, a certain depth, you're going to start to develop a little bit of a film right at the top, and you may not notice it a whole lot, especially in the beginning, but when you're starting to work with these really fine tips, or you're trying to get really consistent with your dots as you progress, keep your tools clean. I just recommend keep a cloth handy. I always have, and it's coated in brown now after all of this. I have here just a old washcloth that I scavenged. I keep it in warm water next to me, in a little Tupperware dish. And I constantly am like here, if I'm practicing, I use it to wipe my surface, along with the paper towel. I'm constantly wiping my tools off. That's going to save you a lot of headache in the long run. If you do decide to use glass or some other item, like I've got here, I'm going to move this away. You might have seen me use this before. Under my little washcloth that I have this sitting on, I just have a little Ziploc bag that I filled with some old pinto beans. It doesn't have to be pinto beans, it can be anything you like. Because of the flexibility of this, it helps everything stay in place. Nothing's gonna roll around. You don't need a cloth on it, but because it's a plastic bag, if I lean on it or whatever, it tends to sweat, and who wants that? Another one of my little tips. Thank you ever so much again for joining me. I really appreciate you stopping by. If you have any questions, concerns, hints, tips, tricks, comments, whatever, drop it below. I like to see what you guys think. If there is anything else that you would like me to cover in a future video, drop by. Drop by, say hi, let me know. All right, so even though I am a relative beginner myself, I want to help you guys out. I started from scratch. I love research. I'm kind of nerdy that way. I love to know everything there is to know about whatever it is that I'm obsessed with. And right now that's mandala.art, right? So if I don't have an answer, I can help you find one. If you yourself are watching this and you're just getting into the art and you're not already a member of my group, go out and search either on Sylvan Miss Designs Facebook page. It's linked there. Or you can just do a Facebook search for Mandala.art for the true beginner. All right, and I hope to see you guys there. Okay, well, again, take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all again soon. Bye-bye.